Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards, with your host, Mel Blackmore.
Hi, and welcome back to the ISO Show, and a Happy New Year for 2023. We've got some really great podcast interviews lined up for you this year, and yes, hopefully sharing some top tips on some new standards that are coming out, as well as helping you obviously to continue to raise your game in 2023. Now, I'd just like to pick up on the last podcast that we recorded in December last year, which was on the most popular podcast in 2022. But I thought for this podcast episode, I'd like to share with you some of my personal favourites that I recorded. So I've just selected 5 of my favourites from 2022. And yeah, just to explain what they were and why. And we'll also include some snippets of them in case you want to go back and listen to those episodes in case you missed them in 2022. So the first one was episode 102, What's in a Name? And I really enjoyed this conversation with Sarah Ball, who's a consultant, a QHSE consultant at Blackmores, because she was sharing her views and tips on the power behind the name of a management system. And in fact, I think sometimes if you actually mention the name management systems, you could see a twitch maybe, because we know that there are actually some far better names than just a management system for your ISO management system. And it may sound like a ridiculous thing, but actually first impressions count. Your brand counts. Your culture counts. So this is something I'm really passionate about. I think your management system should be bespoke. It should be a blueprint for your business operations, whether that's covering sustainability, risk, or quality management. I don't really care. It should be branded specifically for your business. And so in this particular episode, we talk about different ideas. First of all, we talk about, what a definition of a management system actually is, which is obviously that's, your framework for running your business in alignment with an ISO standard. But we talk about how sometimes the name of your management system can actually dissuade engagement. It can turn people off. Or the name of like a quality manual or a quality management system might just turn somebody off. So we were talking about different ideas, unique management system names, just to kind of wet your whistle and get you thinking about some new ideas and inspiration when it comes to naming conventions, because a lot of businesses don't just have one standard now. Some of our clients have about 7 ISO standards. So it's not called a quality, information security, environmental da-da-da-da-da-da. It's just rebranded for their company, and it always gets more traction. There's definitely more engagement, and people feel more empowered to take responsibility for their ISO management system. Anyway, I'm going off on one now. Here's a clip from that episode.
And like you say about systems, people use the phrase systems for all sorts of different things, don't they? It could be a sales CRM system, SharePoint, which is another system. So yeah, all businesses have got different types of technology and software systems that it could be confusing. Well, what is this management system?
Yeah, definitely. And I think by calling it management in itself, like you say, it absolutely alienates a lot of people, because they think it's no longer relevant for them then if they're not in that sort of management structure within that business. But the best way to make your ISO management system work for you is for everyone to play their part and to understand what their part is. So if the name is alienating people from thinking it's relevant straight off the bat, then it's going to make that engagement much more difficult as you implement it within the company and get everyone to understand what their role is.
Yeah, that's right, because you want to encourage everybody to, well, first of all, to look at it, to read anything within it, to adopt it so that that's their way of working, and obviously to comply with it. And that you're absolutely right, that engagement is so key. And actually that just reminds me, we need to bring you in for another podcast on your engagement amplifier that you've created for the ISology Hub, because that's just awesome. And I know that is a pain point for a lot of businesses in, getting employee buy-in with the management system. But again, going back to basics, one of the triggers is that naming convention, isn't it? I mean, I know that when we're doing proposals for clients, we have to give it a name, helping to implement a management system. And I think, when you start a project, Sarah, as a consultant, you have to give it a name, but it doesn't mean to say that that's the right name. So, I mean, what advice and guidance would you give to a business that maybe embarking on creating a new management system, or in fact, they might already have a management system labelled as, I don't know, let's say a health and safety management system? What kind of advice would you give them?
So I think, first of all, early on, when you're creating a new management system, you need to decide on that name really early on in the process, because otherwise people will create their own name for it, and then it's very difficult to rebrand at a later stage. So kind of have that discussion right at the early doors. And you want to understand what it is you're trying to convey with your management system. How do you want people to connect with it in the organisation? And there can be lots of different types of considerations to take into account for that. So you can go for names that are familiar in your organisation. If you've got brands that you could potentially associate with, then immediately that's going to make it familiar for your employees. And you want it to be something that they can connect to and feel is relevant to your business and unique to your business, I guess. You don't want it to feel like everyone else's management system, because everyone will be bespoke and unique to that organisation that's implemented it. So consider, what is familiar sort of terminology that you would use within your organisation, and try and feed that into the name in some way. It's a good starting point. I think something that you have to have is it's got to be relevant to your business, to your marketplace potentially, relevant to the sort of customers that you have, so that it resonates with your employees and with your customers as well. It's got to be something that you feel an instant connection to. And I think going back to it being familiar, it's one of those strange things that people do, that they name inanimate objects that they spend a lot of time with. Like I name my car, for example, and I know other people name cars and things like that. It's because it's a tool you're using all the time and you spend a lot of time in it, so you give it a name to make it feel more familiar. And the management system is exactly the same. If it's a tool you're going to be using and you want people to feel comfortable with, then give it a name that they're going to feel comfortable with and that reflects who you are as a business.
Yeah, so in terms of the branding of your organisational products, services, you might have a really strong brand as an organisation. So
another of my favourites isn't actually just one episode, it's actually a series, and that was on carbonology. Back in Q1 in 2022, I introduced David Algar, who's the carbonologist at Blackmores, and it was a fascinating discussion with him. We knew straight away when we were talking about doing a podcast on carbonology, it had to be more than one podcast. So I think it ended up becoming, definitely 7 for each of the 7 steps. But we also, due to the demand and how popular those standards were, we also recorded some on carbon calculations, for example, which was a really popular one back in Q1. So you might be thinking, what is carbonology? So carbonology, it's our methodology for helping a business to be carbon neutral, but it's underpinned by 2 ISO standards. One is ISO 14064 for carbon footprint verification, and the second is on carbon neutrality, which is PAS 2060. And fingers crossed, that could become an ISO within the next year or 2. So we talk about all things carbon and answered a lot of questions that we get asked about things like carbon offsetting, carbon reduction plans, PPN, which are public procurement notices that were introduced last year that businesses needed to comply with. So we touch on quite a broad range of topics associated with helping you on your carbon neutrality journey. So that was fascinating to discuss that with David and listen to some of those insights. And I think out of all of them, I would say that There were two in particular, one on commitment. Okay, so that's about, that leadership commitment. So that was number 93, and also reduce, which was the episode after that. So here's a short clip on the Reduce podcast. But this is where we're getting really crystal clear on making reductions as far as carbon emissions are concerned. And this is where we're going to be doubling down on being absolutely laser focused on implementing those reductions. And I think this is where the credibility comes in. So rather than a company just paying a price for an offset, this is the difference. This is where you're actually getting serious about making those reductions. So if they're not doing that, then quite frankly, in my personal opinion, I think they're missing a trick. It's not just good for the environment, but it's good for business as well, both financially and operationally. So could you just walk us through this phase? So this is step 4, isn't it, in carbonology? And just take us through the reduce phase, David.
Of course. So like you mentioned, it is a requirement of the standards to actually make those reductions. So this is a point in the carbonology process where you begin implementing your carbon footprint management plan, or carbon reduction plan if you've called it that, and also communicating the implications of this to your staff and anyone external, if they need to get involved. To gauge how successful these initiatives actually are, you do need to find a way of monitoring your emissions. So basically a plan to collect data and continually report on emissions and activity use. So, whether that's a weekly or monthly basis or quarterly. So basically there's two main sides to this process and this step in the carbonology, methodology. Communicating the reduction plan to your staff to, make sure they, know what needs doing, and monitoring on its effectiveness, essentially.
Okay, great. So just to highlight that then, so there are two main sides to this process, you said. One is communicating the reduction plan to your staff, which is so important. And from our experience of implementing management systems, there isn't much point in having a management system if you're not going to communicate it to employees. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about, how you go about doing that. And then the second one was monitoring its effectiveness. Yeah, so you don't really know if you are hitting your targets, objectives, unless you've got some kind of key performance indicator, some kind of targets on that you can actually monitor again. So yeah, let's dive into that then, David.
Yeah, so like I mentioned a moment ago, the standard requires you to make reductions, whether they're absolute or intensity-based reductions, between reporting periods. So the way this is actually achieved is through that carbon footprint management plan, or carbon reduction plan as we've called it. But staff won't know how or why to contribute to this plan if they don't actually know it exists in the first place. Hence why you need that communications plan to back it up. What this means is, staff need to be aware of the specific changes that are going to come into play and how this will affect their roles and how they can contribute to making reductions. And, at the end of the day, they need to know the reason why the business has chosen to aim for this.
So how do you go about managing those communications?
So ideally, communications should be regular, and they really should provide staff with enough detail and context to basically empower them to contribute to reductions. Of course, in the real world, in talking about running a real business, not everyone will like these changes, especially if they're big changes. So it's really important to communicate the reasons why they're occurring to staff and the potential benefits that they will actually gain for them, relative to their job role.
So I know in terms of experience with other ISO standards, I think it's really key to empower employees to take responsibility for these changes. And a key part of that is getting them involved on this journey at a very early stage. And in some respects, trying to make it as fun as possible. And I know that might sound a bit weird in a business sense, but it works. If you can almost have competitions or initiatives, being able to communicate that. And a lot of companies now have almost like social media channels internally, so people can talk about things. So it's about creating a bit of a buzz and an atmosphere, isn't it, about acting responsibly and doing the right thing and making sure that they're all sharing the vision, that they're all on this journey together. So, could you give me some kind of more practical examples, though, like from an operational perspective now, on how it could be beneficial for an organisation?
Yes, a common sort of practical example from an operational perspective, a lot of businesses are thinking about or implementing at the moment are electric vehicles. So I'm sure that most staff would actually gladly switch to an electric vehicle, but it's not really a practical option for everyone. But this could be a good opportunity to actually support staff's transition towards an electric vehicle in some ways. Perhaps through more charging points at your office to, get rid of that range anxiety, or potentially some sort of financial incentive to allow them to make that switch. this could work in your favour, particularly if you end up having to pay lower expenses for business mileage. Depending on where you get your energy from and how much the price of petrol at the specific time, it could result in actually some savings.
Yeah, so the other thing that you mentioned was about the monitoring and measurement. So could you just drill down into that in a bit more detail?
Yes, so the other side of this, as I mentioned a minute ago, is actually monitoring the success and the progress of these initiatives. Depending on the data you're collecting and the actual structure of your organisation, it would be ideal if you could collect the data at regular intervals and plug this into a nice big spreadsheet. That'll allow you to see trends across the year and between years. You'll be able to compare March this year with March last year and see how you're getting on. The benefit of this is you can see the success, or if things aren't going so well, the actual failure or inefficiencies of any initiatives you've got in real time. Again, in practical terms, I think I went on a rant about this in the last episode, is taking meter readings at regular intervals, because this actually allows you to compare trends regularly instead of having random readings across the year. And again, collecting mileage data at regular intervals so you can actually see the differences there, or tracking potentially freight movements. And if necessary, this means you'll be able to take preventative action. Say if, for instance, you see a massive spike in electricity or water or waste at a certain site, you'll be able to see that quickly instead of waiting till the end of the year and do something about it. But on a more positive note, this is a really good opportunity to recognise the success of specific sites or specific individuals, or potentially sustainability groups. Staff are a resource from a business perspective. So if an individual or group of individual comes up with a really good and successful idea that leads to reductions, I personally think they should be rewarded, and this potentially could incentivise others to follow suit and ultimately make your life easier if more people are involved.
Another one of my favourites from 2022 was an interview with a company who'd achieved ISO 27001 about a year before, and it was explaining about their journey. So I really enjoyed this conversation with Phil Bailey, Managed Service Director from PMC Retail. So we were talking about lessons learned, and also he shared some of his top tips on the implementation of ISO 27001 and what they've experienced throughout that journey. So that was a really interesting conversation. And he also recommended a couple of things. One was a book on the magic of thinking big by David Schwartz. Yeah, and he also talked about some of the benefits and how they've identified risks and put actions in place to mitigate the risk and to continue to bolster their existing information security structure by having a wealth of resources and unified way of working across the organisation. So that's definitely an interesting interview that's worth a listen to. So that was episode 117. That's really where the journey actually begins, isn't it? Because it's down to embedding that information security management system. So it sounds as though you've got a team of people at PMC that are supporting you with the management of that across the organisation.
Yes, indeed. That's absolutely right.
Yeah. I mean, how would you say that the work that you've done with Blackmores, through the ISO support plan has helped?
I think, to be honest, we embraced the ISO program right from the beginning. We quickly understood that certification wasn't something we do on our own, and it was important to use the experience of an ISO 27001 consultancy, and that's one of the reasons why we actually chose Blackmores. Your help and guidance was instrumental in our achievement, to be honest. We gave ourselves a goal to achieve the standard within 6 months of starting the program, and we came to know that that was a very ambitious goal, and that was confirmed by the consultant you provided to us. But we knew that we had the right team on the program, and actually that came to fruition. We actually completed the standard, the certification, within the 6-month goal. But that was brought about as a result of Blackmores helping us to get there.
Well, I think it was definitely a team effort, and I think as long as you've got a robust programme in place and you know exactly what everybody's doing and everybody's working together in collaboration, it can make all the difference, can't it, rather than just one person working in isolation, because information security is spread right across the organisation. It's not just IT security, it's also personnel security, so there's an element of HR support there, along with physical security controls as well. And if you've got multiple locations, that doesn't happen overnight.
No, agreed. And I think we had the choice of certifying just managed services or certifying the whole business, and we took the route of certifying the whole business because we felt that it would actually bring about a number of benefits for us.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and that you've actually achieved that successfully within that 6-month time frame as well. So in terms of learning from that experience of managing standards, what would you say you've learned from that experience?
I think I'll just start with the journey wasn't a walk in the park, but the satisfaction of achieving the standard is enormous. PMC's processes and practices are now aligned both in India and in the UK to the ISO standard. In my mind, this has brought about a strengthening of our rigour, actually, when implementing systems and solutions. For me, it was important that the programme was endorsed and supported from the very top. That support meant that we had very few obstacles to overcome. From my previous employment experience, I know it would have been much harder had the exec support not been in place.
Yeah, actually, that seems to be one of the common trends with other interviews that I've done in relation to ISO standards, and not just ISO 27001, but other standards on environmental management and health and safety and quality. The common kind of thread, I think, in terms of achieving success is that leadership commitment. So the fact that you had that endorsement from the exec team very early on, it sounds as though that was instrumental in driving that project forward at the pace it needed to go at the time.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely agree with that, 100%.
Okay, great. So what would you say have been the main benefits of implementing ISO 27001 and the work that you've done on an ongoing basis now to maintain that management system?
I think there are a whole bunch of them, actually. And I know that when I pulled the business case together to present back to the board, that this was the right direction for us to go down. I think there were a group of them, so demonstrating that we could identify the risks to the business and put mitigation in place, adhering to the requirements of the standard. That was certainly one of them. Certification demonstrates to third parties that we have a robust security infrastructure in place with appropriate practices and processes. And I think that more and more we're seeing that our prospects and current customers are expecting organizations that they work with that actually have the ISO 27000 standard in place as a prerequisite for doing business with them. And I think that, working with retailers, I think that's absolutely vitally important in that sector, in that vertical. For me also, it's about protecting our business, understanding what those risks are, understanding that what we do need to actually protect our business, because the knock-on is that we're actually protecting our customers, we're actually protecting our partners and our people through that increased reliability of security systems and information being in place. It gives improved customer and business partner confidence. Actually, it also establishes credibility with our customers, because there's some of the services that we market to them is around security, and actually having and stating that we've got ISO 27001 is really, really important. If we didn't have that, then perhaps we wouldn't be quite so credible in marketing those services.
Yeah, so you're walking the walk and talking the talk, aren't you? You're actually practicing what you preach.
100%, and I think that's really important. And I think also that we're seeing more and more of our competitors are going down the path. So if we want to compete business, then we absolutely need to have it in place. And, with that in mind, we actually do see it as a pathway to our growth by having that ISO certification in place.
Well, another really enjoyable conversation in 2022 was with Rachel Churchman. And this particular podcast did hit our top 5 most popular podcasts in 2022 as well, which was episode number 100, and how to get the most out of your management review. And I think you can probably hear it in our voices, how much we're enjoying this conversation, and just being able to, it was almost like a therapy session, talking to each other about, some of the do's, the don'ts, the good, the bad and the ugly of conducting management review meetings. And again, for those of you that aren't familiar with management review, this is all about reviewing your business's performance. And some companies do it terribly. I'm not ashamed to admit that I've seen some horrendous cases of that, where it's literally a tick box exercise and it's like half a page. Others where I've seen, data analysis on business performance and fantastic KPIs and how that's been monitored and measured to really help to drive the business forward. And there is such a massive difference. It's unbelievable. So yeah, actually, when we started looking at management review for our company and we decided we wanted to revamp it, I was actually almost naming the podcast How to Kick the Arse Out of Your Management Review, but we thought we'd better tone it down a little bit and then rename it How to Get the Most of Your Management Review. But yeah, it's a good listen, and I definitely recommend, if you're feeling a little bit disheartened by management review, if you feel as though it's been neglected by other managers within your company, if you think that, yeah, it does need a bit of a kick up the arse, then this episode, number 100, is definitely worth a listen to, because we do talk about not just about the inputs and, the outputs of that process, but also about the different ways to conduct a management review and the benefits of each different type as well. So that could be food for thought for 2023 when you're planning your next management review.
And a bit of a top tip for anyone who gets assessed by Blackmores, if you like. We will always look at previous management review reports, and we won't just go back to the last one. We'll have a look at a couple of management review reports, because that will give us an indication of whether it's actually a bit of a cut and paste exercise. Has everyone actually been involved in the management review?
Which some companies are guilty of, aren't they, we find? Yes.
Absolutely, and you can really get a feel for it.
Yeah, we're like, this looks remarkably like last year's and the year before and the year before. And we're like, well, what's actually changed? What's going on in the business? Yeah.
Exactly, and it's a real shame, because the companies are just leaving so many opportunities for improvement on the table just by not doing management review as designed. There's so many sort of hints and tips within the management review inputs that the standards prescribe themselves anyway that just aren't really being utilised by the business. The inputs, the first one on the agenda in any management standard is changes, internal and external issues. And quite often you can see that just kind of skimmed across. Oh yeah, there's been no changes in the business. We've not done anything. That's not really what the standards are looking for, and that's not really what the business is going to get any benefit from if they're just sort of thinking internally as to their processes. It's wanting them to really have a look at what's going on in the world, what's impacting their business externally, but also what's happening internally, and it's not just services we deliver, it's people, it's culture, it's how we work, it's where we work, which is quite topical after COVID. Once people or businesses start thinking a little bit out of the box just for that one input, they're going to suddenly see lots of changes in the business, lots of things that are changing around them that can present risks and opportunities to the business. I think that's where we started, Mel, in our management review. The first sort of question I asked was around, okay, so what's changed internally? What's changed externally? And we actually went and looked at our business risk register and started really sort of drilling down.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And as a result, I think we added I think at that point we actually added 5 or 6 different new issues to our risk register for us to action, just as a result of that one question.
Yeah, that was right. And in fact, I'm happy to share with our audience, some of the topics that we did actually discuss and actions that were taken forward. So, let's run through our management review and what we actually covered, because I think sometimes it's useful for listeners to have some kind of context. So, if we're talking about internal and external issues, well, they might be thinking, well, we haven't really had any, but we had quite a few, didn't we?
Yeah, there was loads, but they were positive as well.
Yeah, but it was things like, we had an office move and there were certain issues associated with that, and still some issues going on with it at that time, because we'd literally only moved offices like about a week or two before, I think, the management review. But also we identified some single points of failure as well, like authorising or proofreading proposals and things like that. So, yeah, on the face of it, it didn't look that pretty, but this is real life. All businesses have risks, and they're continuously being bombarded with certain risks and threats, aren't we? So I think the main thing is to talk about it, identify what we're going to do about it, and commit to that, take action and identify kind of key accountabilities for reducing those risks.
I think the important thing there, Mel, is it's not just highlighting the risks or highlighting the opportunities, but we actually had the open discussion involving the right people to actually work through, well, how are we going to learn from this, or what action are we going to take? And it meant that the management review was doing what it's meant to do, which is drive that improvement by having actual actions coming out.
Last but not least, sustainable development goals. This is something that I'm really passionate about, and you could probably gather that from the podcasts that we did. We did such a lot on the carbon standards. I really enjoyed doing this because it was about raising awareness of not just the sustainable development goals, and by the way, that was one of the most popular podcasts in 2022 about what are the sustainable development goals. But my personal favourite was about how to align your management system with the SDG. Because I think it's all well and good reading the SDGs and being aware of them, but unless you take action and implement them, then what's the point? So I wanted to share 5 actions that you could take away to align your business's management system. And it didn't matter if it was an information security system or quality or sustainability system, and how you could take action and align your business with the SDG. And these were really, really simple tips on things like, objectives, referencing the SDG within your management system, looking at leadership commitment, context, looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and looking at internal and external issues in relation to the SDG. And of course, operational controls. What could you be putting in place to help to meet some of those objectives related to the Sustainable Development Goals? So that's something that, if you're looking at aligning your management system with the SDGs in 2023, that's definitely a good one to go back and listen to. So that was episode 108. It doesn't really matter which standard you've got. You can start to align the SDG goals right now. And it's actually really easy. And you might be thinking, well, where do we even begin? So what I'm going to do, and this is just a short and sweet episode, I'm literally just going to give you 5 areas that you can start to consider the Sustainable Development Goals and making them an integral part of your management system by initially just making a declaration about your commitment, making a pledge to support the Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, so for many of our listeners, this could just be the starting point for them. And as I'm going through this, you'll probably be thinking, there are other clauses within the standards, there are other areas within my management system that I know will support the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm just going to go through 5 tips. Okay, so these are 5 areas that are common across all ISO standards. So I'm going to keep it super simple, just literally to get you started on this. But if you would like any additional support on aligning the Sustainable Development Goals with your management system, or even introducing some of those management systems, we can do that at Blackmores. And so, more than welcome to get in contact with us and we'll provide a free consultation. Or there are heaps of content available over in the ISOlogy Hub, okay, which is our membership portal that gives you access to tons of information on standards, quick tips, coffee break training, e-learning, and roadmaps to implementation, in particular ISO 14001. Well, I'm going to stop waffling on about that now and actually get into the 5 tips. So, number 1 would be leadership. So, is your leadership team already talking about Sustainable Development Goals? Have you already made a commitment publicly about ESG? What have you actually declared that you're going to do? Because that, in theory, whatever that commitment is, should be aligned with your management system already. Okay, but if it's not, let's start the conversation. So in terms of how you can reference this in your management system, obviously leadership need to be involved in making these decisions, making a commitment, and that could be a 1-year commitment, a 10-year, 20-year commitment. So a lot of organisations are making pledges now up to 2025 and 2030 at least. How can you reference that? Well, it could be included within a policy statement within your business. So if you've got environmental management systems, it could be a sustainability policy statement. So you can make reference to your commitment there. And also you could do that on your website and in other areas. In fact, I've noticed on some signatures with some directors, you've actually got the sustainable development goals that they're supporting in the email signature. Okay, so yeah, first and foremost, leadership commitment. And obviously that's a key requirement across all the ISO standards. And that's going to be essential to driving forward any change, any new initiatives that you're looking to introduce as part of your management system, as part of your business's way of working. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to the podcast as much as I've enjoyed making them, and I've been really fortunate in having some fantastic conversations with experts in their field. And yeah, very much looking forward to creating some more podcasts and having some more interesting conversations with leading knowledgeable professionals in the ISO standard space, and also those people that have been through this experience for the very first time and they're just on that journey to learning about ISO standards. So if there are any specific topics or standards that you would like us to cover on the podcast in 2023, then we'd love to hear from you. Or if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, then please do drop us a line as well. So all the details are in the show notes on how you can get in touch with us. We look forward to catching up with you on the next ISO show.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.